I was in a really bad place emotionally and just struggling with depression. And I had connected with Jim a bunch through that season. And I remember one of my friends was checking in with me and I was telling her about different revelations I had had. And she's like, you get these revelations when you work out. Why don't you just work out more? And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I haven't worked out in 6 months. She's like, well, you're always going to the gym. And I'm like, no, Jim's my therapist. And I just laughed because, I like it. I know, it's hilarious. So thanks, Jim. You're my gym membership.
Keep taking your walks too.
I know. I'm just kidding.
I know.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to the podcast. I am so grateful you're here. Oh my gosh. Okay. And I got to tell you guys, the episode right now that you're about to listen to is probably, honestly, one of my favorite episodes I've ever been a part of. And today we have my therapist, Jim Beebe, with us, which if you've been around the podcast at all, you know Jim is one of my favorite guests to have on. He's just a wealth of knowledge and wisdom and experience. And he's worked with humans for, I think, over 40 years, which just blows my mind. Jim has such a grip on grace and helping people get out of living in the shoulda, coulda, woulda trap that we find ourselves in sometimes. So today's episode will bless you so much, especially if you're struggling with judging yourself, comparing yourself, struggling with shame. Sometimes we don't even know we're struggling with shame. Regret is a more common emotion, I think, or struggle that a lot of us can label. But if you're struggling with shame, regret, judgment of yourself, just feeling like you kind of missed the boat, you messed up your life, and all of those things, I just want you to know this episode is going to bless you and help you. Jim, like I said, he's literally one of my favorite humans on the planet. The guy is just, first of all, he's been helping me in my life for, gosh, I think close to 2 decades, maybe over 2 decades, which just blows my mind. We actually met, he was an elder at a church that my husband and I were attending, and we started meeting with Jim, and long story short, we kept in touch, and especially since I got sober, he's just been a godsend. And so grateful for this man, for his ministry, for his heart, for his wisdom, for his experience. He has such a grip on understanding, I think, honestly, Jesus's true mission to help us. It's not about behavior modification. It's not about the things that we've done. It's about heart transformation. And so anyways, I just wanted to come on really quickly to introduce the episode, to introduce Jim. He is just amazing and you're going to love him. And then also I wanted to mention this episode, we're talking about adult topics, adult subjects in this episode. So please put on a headset. This is not an appropriate episode by any means for children. I don't let it fly with cuss words, but it does get colorful with the topics that we discuss because we're talking about real issues. We're talking about shame and some of the things that maybe your past caused you to feel shame and all of that. So I don't want to say any of those words yet in the intro in case you still have younger people still listening. But please, before the episode starts, put in your headset or just listen to this episode by yourself. So be blessed. Enjoy the episode. Also, if you're not already on my email list, please join it. You can go to the show notes and click through to my website and it will pop up. And then you can just put in your name and your email. And that way we can stay in touch email as well. Make sure that if you're not already subscribed to the podcast, make sure you subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and so that you receive notifications when new episodes drop, because we're dropping episodes now every Sunday and every Wednesday. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Be blessed. This might be one where you want to get a piece of paper and pen out, take some notes. This might even be one where you want to listen to it a couple of times. There are a few sections of wisdom and nugget that I'm telling you right now is so valuable and so amazing. I mean, people go to therapy for 15 years and they still don't have a grip on this stuff. Jim has just such a way to articulate how to really deal with this stuff. And he's just a wealth of wisdom and knowledge. So bless you guys for being here. Jim, huge shout out. A Holy Mess community is so grateful for his wisdom and his generosity to be a part of this. So love you all. I'm so grateful you're here and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to a Holy Mess podcast. All right, my friends, we all know life can be so difficult and painful at times, especially when we're carrying grief or loss or wrestling with shame about our past, anxiety about our future, or frankly, like we are just not enough. But there has to be so much more for us. There is hope and joy, peace, love, fun, purpose, and a reason that you, my friend, are on this planet. Let's partner with God so you can be who He created you to be as you wrestle through and trudge through your mess. Hi, I'm Danny, a recovering alcoholic, a mom, a wife, a mentor, and dust. We are only here for a moment, Let's live like it. I'm just like you. I'm a holy mess most days. Actually, every day. Let's have some fun and laugh while trudging through our mess. This stuff doesn't need to be dry and boring. Let's dig in.
Jim, welcome to the podcast. I am so grateful that you keep saying yes when I ask you to be on the podcast. I love sharing your wisdom and your experience and your heart with my people. So thank you. I feel like it's just such a gift. So thanks for
Good to be back, Danny. Good to share this with everybody.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love it. So I thought today we could kind of talk about a couple different subjects. Man, I just think some of us, we're so hard on ourselves and we judge ourselves and we're dealing with regrets or the should-haves or the could-haves or the would-haves, right? And I think that there's the underbelly of that is shame. Shame is like an odd, it's like nailing Jello to the wall a little bit. And so, but I thought, man, can we just talk about regret and should have, could have, would have, and how do we deal with that? Can we just begin talking about it and kind of unpacking it? I'd love to hear kind of your perspective and your heart and your experience as you've.
Yeah, I've got to imagine that you hear a lot of it, especially in the Feeling Better journey, of people wounded by things that happened to them, but wounded by things they did.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Yes, sometimes that's even more so.
Mm-hmm.
We carry that because it feels like we made this choice,
mm-hmm.
And so, gosh, there's got to be so many things that people of earlier choices that, happen in their life,
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like there was this one path that God had for them, their calling, right? So to speak, this was the path that God laid out for them. And it's interesting because, so yesterday, Jim, Kenzie's graduating and I spoke at her Bible class. It was like the last time I'm going to speak. And so I was praying like, Lord, what do you want me to talk about? And I talked about stress management, which actually I recorded a podcast about it right afterwards. So that one may or may not have already been up. I don't know if you guys heard it, but if not, look for the stress management one because I share my heart on that. But one of the things I was sharing with the kids, and Jim, you and I have talked about this a lot, is like, there is no just one path. Like there is no like, thus saith the Lord, this is your path, this is plan A. And if it doesn't work out, tough luck, Chuck. Like, so sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And, there's so much pressure on kids these days, 18 years old. Like, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? It's like, good Lord Jesus, I just figured it out a few years ago what I'm doing with my life. Right. It's like, man, if I had to have everything figured out at 18, I am screwed. Like that path was painful and hard and all of the things. So I think it'd be really good to talk about how, because a lot of us feel like we veered off. There's a fork in the road. I took the wrong fork and now I'm just living with the consequences. And yeah, there's absolutely consequences to our choices. And some of us are living pretty painful consequences from other people's choices. However, I don't believe anymore that it's so hard and fast. And
black and white. Yeah.
Black and white, one path. I think that's the beauty. I mean, that's what I've experienced in my own life, right? I don't think God laid out his life and was like, this is your path, Danny, this is what you're doing. But now I look at even the fruit from the shit storms that I've walked through that I caused or that other people caused in my life. And I'm like, man, I wouldn't trade it now. And that's hard to say because, there was a lot of pain and baggage that came with it. But I look at the fruit now and as I'm still walking through, some of my life is still pretty difficult and hard and complicated.
And some is consequences of all those earlier choices in our lives.
Yeah, I would love to be able to go out to dinner with Gary and have a glass of wine. I would love that. It would be wonderful. It's never going to happen. Like, it's just, I can't, I shouldn't, and I can't for my sobriety's sake and for my health's sake and for my life. And so it's like, okay, how do we stop the black and white thinking that we missed the road that we were supposed to take? And how do we deal with, in a healthy, holistic, Jesus-centered way, the regret or the shame that we feel or all of that? Like, I think it's multifaceted, but.
Don't you think in a way, Danny, in our religious communities, it's harder? I think there's such more, because we put God, in these rules and these advocating for a certain way of living life. And then if you veer off that, and it can be a whole bunch of areas, but I think in the sexuality especially, people really look back with a whole bunch of shame and regret with sexual choices.
Totally.
What came because of that.
Totally.
And I think our religious world is so much more perfectionistic. And probably people, we talk about grace and we talk about, God's, loving us as we are. I mean, people say the right words, but I think that the community, and when we hear this and we measure ourselves against it, especially, but we're already shame-based. So we tend to take that message and then transform it into another hammer to beat ourselves with.
Totally. Oh my gosh. I mean, especially, so let's just take it, adolescent choices, right? Because I heard a lot in adolescence where you can get a secondary virginity or whatever they used to call it. I don't know if they still call it that, but it was still, it always made people feel less than, like you're never going to be the same, right? There's that purity message, which I get. I understand the heart behind what people were trying to do and to keep people, from having to deal with the consequences of those choices, if there are ramifications and all of that. But I think that there's a lot of shame, especially around sexual choices that people have made in adolescence. Oh my gosh. Or, early 20s, all that stuff. I think it's very pervasive and it's very intense. And then we bury it because, oh my gosh, if they only knew, then they'd know how wretched and how dirty and how, I was talking with some teenagers earlier this week about their natural drive. Like, it's very human of them. Like, God made them to be sexual beings. Like, and you and I've talked about how the two hardest, because as I've worked with people in addiction, the two hardest addictions to beat in the whole world. And trust me, every addiction is hard to beat. And my alcoholism was hard and pills and all that. But when someone has struggling with sexual addiction or with food addiction, that's next level. I mean, food addiction, I have my own food issues. I wouldn't call it addiction, but it's hard enough. Like, because these are natural tendencies. These are natural drives in us to eat. And God created us as sexual beings. And so it's like, oh my gosh, like, it's complicated. It's hard. And so my heart just bleeds when I talk with people who have sexual addiction issues or just sexual issues at all, because it's so internal. It's so.
Yeah. So I know it's more, I think sex tends to carry a lot of people, if they would to sort of list out their places of regret or shame, sadness, I think around that. But there's other things too.
For sure. For sure.
And it's so hard, I think, for some of us that we have these regrets that included our children.
Totally.
And included others that we hurt along the way.
Totally.
That we just, we broke up with people in the wrong way, or we used people in the wrong way, or we were drinking when our kids were young, or we got divorced and our kids are now growing up in a divorced family. I mean, these things are so hard because we had this picture in our head of how it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. We measure our life against that, and it certainly doesn't look like that.
Oh, especially when our kids now, 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, are making choices. And we as parents take ownership of like, if I would have done it differently, if I would have just spent more time, wasn't a workaholic, if I would have done this or that, or if I was kinder and wasn't so angry or wasn't so stressed. I mean, the regrets for parents is, I mean, especially when your kid's off the rails or struggling, or, I mean, we have 3 older kids. Most of you guys know our story, but Gary was married before and has 3 older, beautiful, amazing kids. And they're older, but we still are involved and love them and obviously care about them, right? And when they're hurting, you guys, it's intense. I mean, and I didn't even birth these kids, and it's intense for us. It's very intense for Gary. And
hard not to carry some regret. Part of that story.
Or could I have done more? Or should I have done more? Or did I cause this? Or, I mean, it's so multifaceted.
I think sexuality, parenting can hold a lot of that. It can be regrets of ways I didn't honor myself or that I hurt somebody else.
Totally.
And I think there's a sense of damaged goods. Mm-hmm. That we feel like there's something just defective and, that in some ways compared to the whole other world, this unique shame-based, sort of screwed up story.
So I'm the unicorn. I'm the only one. Only one that's messed up or screwed up or
so then the would have, could have, should have.
And then on top of that, so like taking it back to religion, because obviously I'm a Christian and my whole job is to help people heal spiritually, right? That's what I feel like my calling is in this world. We feel like everybody else gets God's grace. Everybody else understands God's grace. Everybody else experiences God's grace, but not me. Yeah. Like I missed the boat. Like Jim, oh man, God loves you. And I see you experiencing it and understanding it. And I feel like you get it, a billion times better than I do. Right. And that's also shame. And that's also the things that I shame internally of like, there's something wrong with me. Right. Shame says, how do you explain it? Shame says,
it's not I did something wrong. I am something wrong, right? And this regret, it's so hard because you can't go back and relive your life, right? So this regret is I'm gosh, I have this messy story and I can't fix it. I can't get those years back.
Mm-hmm.
I can't get my teens, my 20s, my 30s back.
Yeah.
I can't redo my kids' lives, kind of thing. And some people are living with gnarly consequences. I've talked to people who have AIDS. I've talked to people who've, they're got, 3 previous marriages.
Mm-hmm.
I've talked to kids whose their children are on the street or something. And it's, oh my gosh, the struggle with not getting into that woulda, coulda, shouldas component against it is so strong, right?
Totally.
And then we have this whole exposure to people's lives from the outside, right? We're not inside their lives, but we're on the outside. So we're exposure to people's lives where they, they did X, Y, and Z. They walked the path that we're supposed to walk. It looks like it from the outside. And they married the right person. They went to college and they did ... Oh my gosh. And what do you do with this? Because you can't go back and undo it. Sometimes you can't put it back together again.
Totally.
So I think this issue of regret and comparison, and even I'd say it's grief and sadness, because there's a loss to all that, what I didn't get to experience. And maybe some of it genuinely, maybe, I know there's a lot of things you can still go do, but for a lot of us, no, I'm not, at my 50s, I'm not going back to college.
Totally.
I dropped out because I was, smoking too much weed. And now I can't go back and complete that. And certainly I can't change my story.
Yeah.
I can't redo my story as far as the facts and figures of it kind of thing. But let's talk today about, in a certain way, you can change your story. Okay, so let's talk about what that looks like.
Totally.
But first, let's just empathize to this is a human struggle with the woulda, coulda, shouldas.
Totally.
It is human. It's so common for us. And I think the population you talk to, most of the people listening to us today, make effort, are rule keepers, are pleasers, are, want to do the right thing. And boy, when we measure ourselves against that, it's a good side to us because we're generally sort of these, rule keepers in the best of ways can be there. Okay. But often our life doesn't match up to what we think the rules were to live kind of thing. So what do we do with this stuff? Where do we go?
Yeah.
Okay. So can I give you a couple thoughts on it?
Please. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Number one, I would say this. I don't think you can heal yourself by yourself. I think you need to be known. You need to name and expose these things that just feel like they're this deep sadness or deep or shame that we have. You got to have community where you bring it into and share your story.
Yeah.
Okay?
Amen.
Share your story within a group of community of people that also are sharing their stories. Like your Feeling Better Journey does it. 12-step programs do it. Some life groups at churches will do it if they do it well. Some don't, but some can. But I need a community. And sometimes it can just be one friend.
Exactly.
But I need a space where I share my story, get out of my head. Because if I'm just in my head with me, I just rework it. What do I do with it? I'm stuck, and I can't fix it kind of thing. So I think having a place to share it, okay? I think especially as we get older and as we look back on our life, there's this stage of life that we go through. They call it integrity versus despair is the terminology they'd use for this stage of life. So it's in their 50s generally or 60s. But the despair, of course, is I can't come to terms with my life. And now I'm getting towards the end of it. I'm 58 years old. I can't undo it. God, now I realize, how precious it all is. And I can't put Humpty back together. So there's a sense that people then, they stay in judgment and they stay in the sadness and they just go into despair. Integrity is I come to terms to peace with my whole story. So we'll talk about how to get there, but it's like, and I tell you, Danny, I think we got to fight for it. Got to fight to come to peace with my story. And, it's weird. You're coming to peace with your death because your mortality starts feeling really real in your 50s, especially 60s, 70s. You're like, oh, I got friends dying, I got things, bad, some diagnosis myself. And so really that starts to get emotionally real. So I'm coming to terms with my humanity and my finiteness, but I'm also coming to terms with my past, my future and my past both. So this is part of our challenge is can I find a place of serenity and of integrity, of peace, of acceptance of all this stuff that's gone on. So find a place to share, find a place to let people in. That's a safe space to share. Your program's great. And that's a huge place because that's a big part of what you do there is create space for people to bring their story with other people that are sharing their story. And so I think it's important. Don't go to places if they're not sharing their story, don't do it. Go someplace else where they're going to be open. because it's identifying with each other. And Danny, you and I both know, gosh, everybody's got a story.
Yeah.
Who doesn't, right? At this stage of life. I mean, we all have this journey that we have, right? And shame doesn't really, shame can sit anywhere. So I talk to people who are like, oh, I'm a third grade, I cheated on a spelling test. And oh my gosh, I always felt bad. And they don't know what to do with it anymore. And we'd say, oh, come on, I've got some major things I regret over it. That's not mine. That's like, yeah, but that's their story, right?
Well, but you bring up a good point, right? And we'll talk about this in a minute, but about how impressionable we are when we're kids. And those stories, I talk to people who, pretty common, boys wet the bed until into their early teens. I mean, even they had to be on medicine and all that, but the shame that they carry because of that, right? Or women as well. And, smelling like pee at school, once in a while. It's like this stuff, it's like neuroplasticity, right? It just stuck in our brains. And even if the memory's not alive and well today, like it's the shame of we can feel it in our bodies just like it was yesterday. And so you're talking about like the childhood stuff, you guys, even if it was small and you're like, what the heck, get over it. It's like, are you kidding? It was monumental to your little child inside.
In the moment. Oh yeah. Waking up and you wet the bed again and you're so scared, or you won't invite anybody over sleepover because of that, or you can't go to somebody else's house.
Totally. Or if your parents shamed you and were like, the heck's wrong with you? Or, they're mad because they have to clean it or something like just, there's so much. I mean, and that's just one story, but there's also like, being left out on the playground and then all of a sudden realizing all the places you're left out and, oh, I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy or it's these lies that we buy into because we lived some felt experience of pain, of abandonment, of rejection. And so this is where Jim's talking about, you guys, in community, in safe space, holy places, recovery rooms, the Feel Better Journey, in different healthy relationships where people are sharing their vulnerabilities too. That's where it's like the felt experience of being seen, of being safe, of holding someone else's story as well. That's holy ground. And honestly, holding someone else's story helps heal you. I mean, it's Jim and I joke, but like I built my business, my career to help heal me. I mean, walking with people helps heal me, right? Any good therapist, they're doing work on themselves too, and they're healing as they're helping us. Yeah.
Well, I think there's that. I think shame and regret, they're really overlapping, but there's some differences in them too. And this one with regret can be especially hard because it's things that I did myself, right? I'm having a hard time coming to terms with what I chose to do.
Yeah.
And this can be having an affair. It can be the abortion. It can be the acting out. It can be the bar hopping that people did. It can be drug use and they think they've messed their brain up, right? Then they're back in their day, right?
Totally. And it can be also not so dramatic of things. It could be, oh, I married the wrong person, or I went to the wrong college, or I picked the wrong career, or I lived in the wrong city, or I went to the wrong church. I mean, the regret also gets in the little crevices of different places. When something's feeling off, we as humans tend to, put the pressure on ourselves, like label it that, oh, it's because of this. We want to figure everything out. So we attach it to things. Like if I just would have gotten that different degree, my whole life would have been different. My finances would be better, all of that. So break down the difference between regret and shame.
Yeah, there's a little difference in there, and I think they're very closely tied, And it's interesting because they say that as you age, you regret more what you didn't do than what you did. Which is also an interesting twist of regret.
And it is.
But let's talk about what to do with it. Well, number one, we're just validating that this is a human experience. Whoever's watching this today is like, nah, you're in good company. This is a human experience. To live with this, wish you could redo it. If I could know then what I now know, right? What would be different? How would my life have turned out different, right? So knowing that you're not an oddball, you're not unusual. This is the human experience. And I don't know, most people I talk to they very often can be in that. And it can, for some people, the regret can move into just deep shame and embarrassment and a grief and a sadness, right? It's all wrapped up in, there's loss. Yeah. There's sadness. There's time that was lost. There's relationship that was lost. There's opportunity that was lost. That was part of that. And maybe it can be also judgment that I did things that really weren't in God's will, what God wanted for me. So especially if we're like rule keepers and pleasers, man, that's really hard to do it. So we got to find community that's open and honest about it and sharing their journey and sharing their story. And I think this is a huge part of why the 12-step meetings are so good, because the only thing that gets you through the door is I'm screwed up and I need help, right? That's the only thing that gets you to even start, right? Is like, I need to be someplace. And everybody just, all they do there is just share their stories over and over again. And it's something very healing. Sometimes you need not to talk about your story only, but you need to hear other people's stories.
Amen.
Because, this will give more grace to other people. Well, felt compassion for them. And it's hard to do that for ourselves.
Yeah.
But that's, find community to do that. Get to a meeting, find a good recovery place, sign up for the Feeling Better journey, do something where there's intentionality with community, because it's so hard to find. So hard to get. So can't do it on our own kind of thing. Okay.
Yeah.
The next thing that I think of is, and it's just something you've said before in other programs, but it's sort of the core of forgiveness also, but there's sort of this radical acceptance, but also radical sort of the heart of forgiveness, which is compassion, and beginning to look back on your past through the lens of compassion. Because what we get stuck on is the behaviors and the actions and the things we did versus who we were and what was going on inside, right? And the judgments that we take because we're comparing ourselves against an ideal or a person that didn't exist, right? And I look back in my first marriage and the choices, and looking back, there's so many obvious signs that there was unhealthy and dysfunctional, but I couldn't see. In fact, the signs that it was unhealthy drew me to it. So, but I look back as myself now to look at that, and I could judge that. How stupid was I? And my gosh, and what that cost, and blah, blah. I could just chew myself up, right? But if I begin to try to think of my 19, 20, 21-year-old self, I begin to see that deeper self, my story. It's really important for people, all of you out there listening to this, to begin to see yourself through the eyes of compassion and to look at, but why? You're good at this, Danny. You do that a lot. Not just what I did, but why. What was going on inside?
Sure.
This is that your own struggle, your own immaturity, your own brokenness, your own history, your own trying to work stuff out, And so that, I think compassion gives me a window.
For sure.
And we got to fight for that. But it's the same thing we give other people, because we'll do it for others.
Yeah.
Generally, it's for most of us, it's pretty easy when someone's sharing their brokenness or their story.
Yeah.
For us to be very compassionate towards them, because it's not our story. Oh, it's their story. So we're trying to now do the same thing for ourselves. So think of yourself through that lens.
Well, and you bring up a good point, and you circle it right back into community, because I don't think we can find compassion or empathy for ourselves until we see someone else have compassion and empathy. I remember sharing stuff with you or stuff with Lori, my mentor, and I was still beating myself up. Like, I almost wanted you guys to judge me. Like, I shared in a way for you guys to judge me, right? But when I was given, oh, no wonder, Danny, you were so needy. Oh, no wonder, Danny, like, these different things that affected you. And it was like, oh, wow. Like, it kind of gives you a step away from just like the tight grip of judgment, because we judge ourselves. We judge ourselves, and having compassion for ourselves is such a it's like speaking in tongues. Like, hey, just go speak in tongues, right? It's like you have to have the experience and to be able to do it. And so I think you're right. And it circles right back to, without a touch from the Holy Spirit, like, in Jesus' name, be healed. It's in community, right? And it's the Holy Spirit in me. It's the Holy Spirit in you, where we have compassion and empathy and hold space for people. And that's how I think we can find compassion and empathy for ourselves. When we see the compassion or the love of God in someone's eyes for us over our wrong choices, holy cow, there's nothing else you need. I mean, honest to God, that's it. Sign me up. That's the check. That's the only thing you need.
I think you're right. There's a lot there that just starts and stops there. So, one thing to do is get a picture of you. Think of I'm sure that there's a lot of different things we can feel regret over, but get a picture of you at maybe one of those places, that 14-year-old self or the 16 or 25-year-old self, and get a picture, because now we're looking at, as a 45-year-old or 60-year-old, we're looking at it. But stick that picture up somewhere and start to just begin to try to, when you look at that picture, just begin to speak compassion over that picture. Okay. and speaks, like, oh man, you were with what you were struggling. You were hurting. You were needy. You were frustrated. You were lonely. You were scared. You're going to lose what you needed. Therefore, yeah, you didn't keep good boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
You were in your own way trying to figure things out, but you're acting out stuff, right? And boy, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, right? Versus, I'm mad at you for going through that.
Yeah. You
right?
SOB, you screwed your whole life up, right?
Yes, exactly. Because we have all these parts of ourselves, and when I was 18, I was 18. I wasn't 60, So I think get a picture out of you, look at that earlier age, okay? Put it out somewhere so you can begin to speak to that part of you.
Yeah.
Speak to those parts of you that have this regret that's there, okay? Along with, have community that's going to speak some of that stuff too, okay? And then beginning to ask the whys. What's going on underneath it, right? This is even Jesus. He really wasn't terribly concerned about what people were doing, except the ones that were like judgmental and legalistic.
Totally.
And I think he was really more interested in the heart, in that deeper first order change.
Mm-hmm.
That's that deep heart change. I think that's really where he was. It wasn't in this just behavioral stuff, external stuff, right? So I think some compassion as you look at that, okay? Secondly, we make these judgments and the shoulds, and that's how the regret is, that I should have done something different.
Mm-hmm.
I shouldn't have married that person. I shouldn't have used those drugs. I shouldn't have yelled at my kid, okay? And what I would say is, okay, well, really, should you have done X, Y, or Z based on who you were? And everybody says, all right, well, based on that, no, I was just unhealthy, and unhealthy people do unhealthy things. But that is a really, really important shift. Instead of looking at my past with judgment of some ideal, because I'm looking at it through a judgment of reality of who I am. And the truth is, I should have done what I did. I should have married my first wife.
Mm-hmm.
I should have. How do I know that? I married her. Now, it cost me, and it was painful, and there was a lot to learn through that, but I should have done it, okay? Somebody else, I'd say to them, well, should you have had an abortion? Oh, gosh, no, that God hates that, and I feel awful, and okay, that's the regret part of it. But on the other hand, based on who you were and what you were struggling with and how lost and lonely were, does it make sense that you had an abortion? Yeah, based on that, because you'd give that to somebody else. But beginning to actually, what's the right word, prescribe my past as my story, because I should have lived my story, because that's what I lived.
Yeah.
Versus some ideal story, some magical fairy tale, I guess, that doesn't exist. All those things that happen for deep reasons.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Danny, and this is a really fun topic, but it's a little scary. I don't know how much free will we have over so much of this stuff. I'm not sure that we're out there like every choice we made a choice.
Yeah.
I think sometimes the choices make us,
Mm.
And so that beginning to try that on with this sort of radical acceptance and prescribing, I should have done what I did. There's no surprise. And and if you went back and relived it all over again, you would live out the same life, right?
Well, because you don't have the wisdom, right? Like hindsight's always 20/20.
Yeah.
But when we're in living it, we're doing the best we can with what we have. And you guys, Jim's not saying, oh yeah, we can go out and do willy-nilly anything that we want. What he's trying to say is we have to find this deeper understanding, this place of grace, that grace covers it all. And if we would have had different knowledge or different tools in our tool belt, we probably would have made different decisions. Maybe. But we don't know. And so all we have is the here and the now. So what do we do with the here and the now? The only way to make peace with that is to find this deep compassion and understanding. And you guys, Jim, this is gold, what you just said, because I'll be honest, because we've talked about this in the Feel Better journey, is it's hard to hear, well, I should have made those choices. I should have had the affair. I should have, done those things because they cause so much harm in people's lives. It's like, no. We're not saying if you could do it all over again right now, you're going to choose to do it. What we're saying is you did the best you could in the moment with what you had. Mm-hmm. And sure, some of us made bonehead choices and hard choices, but also, man, why did you do it? Out of neediness, out of fear, out of shame, out of all these deeper places in us that hold us hostage. And if we're just, condemning and beating ourselves up and judging, I mean, honestly, it's like we've got to experience God's grace in a tangible way. And this is how we do it. Jesus did all this for us to help us.
Paul says in Romans, I do that which I should not do.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really, I use this language about shoulds because, people react to it because they don't like this language, but
They do.
But I would say, try it on and try saying to yourself, just verbal and say it out loud. I should have fill in the blank. Take your regret, make a regret list. Just start inventory. What do I regret? And some people are going to be pages. Okay.
Yeah.
Just write it all out. And then do this extra. Now I'll take that list. And now I want you to write a list and take every item I should have, and then fill it in with the regret.
Yeah.
I should have. Okay. And you're going to practice over and over and over again. Okay. To do this, because of course we said I should not have, right? Or I should have done something different than I did, right? And what we're trying to do is now shift to no, you should have, probably for deep reasons, X, Y, or Z, right?
Well, and the only way to get to the deep reasons, truly, for me, I mean, I remember when you had me do that list with some stuff in adolescence. I mean, first I was just beating myself up.
Yeah.
But then after I was like, oh, no wonder I got to the deeper neediness. I got to the deeper, but why, what caused me to make those decisions. And by doing this, you guys, you can literally deal with the root issue so that you don't repeat the history that you hate or that you judge about yourself.
Right.
Right. I mean, this is what it's all about.
Right. So anybody listening to this now, sit down, write a list of regrets, all that stuff that your head says, I wish I could redo it. And now I can never fix it now. And how could I have ever been so stupid? Whatever those are. And then I want you to make a list saying, and just fill in the blank, I should have, and fill it in. Okay. And you may need to do it every day for a year. You may just have to fight for that radical acceptance and radical grace for your story. Okay. And probably it'd be good to take that list, the I should have list, and share that with somebody. You sit down with a good friend and say, I heard this on this YouTube and I'm going to try it. Instead of this other, shame-faced, beat myself up voice, I'm going to say, man, I should have had the abortion because I had the abortion. I should have had the affair because I had the affair. I should have, drank my 20s away because I drank my 20s away, right? Whatever it is, right? And then share that with somebody else.
Somebody who's safe. Somebody who owns
not going to say, stuff. Wow, that's a cheap grace, and no, you're lacking in your standards. No, none of that. Don't do that. Exactly. Do it with someone else, only with someone who has a story.
Yeah. And who's worked through their stuff, right?
Yeah. Hopefully it'll help them too.
Yeah.
Anybody you talk to, this is going to relate to. Okay. So we're trying to prescribe, I'm trying to move the shoulds into the fact that it's what I would call more, I'm more being reality based than idealized. The ideal is just in my head. Mm-hmm. And I'm an idealist. So I'm a rule keeper, kind of good kid kind of role. But boy, oh boy, does that have a wicked bite to it when I'm comparing myself to some ideal life, right?
Well, something that you just said, because a lot of us fantasize, like dream, and I don't mean fantasize, but I mean like fantasize, like dream about a better life, a better future, all of that. But some of us, we dream about the better life we should have had or the better things. And in a way, it's very self-sabotaging and it's very, very painful because we dream backwards of like what should have been. We don't get to live that again. All we have is the here and now and the future, right? And this is what we're trying to do to healing the past and getting out of that fantasy land of the past, the history that should have been, gets you half a shot to live more present in the moment and to build a beautiful future and not repeat history in a painful way, right? So this is what Jim's talking about.
That's right. Danny, that's really good, right? It actually gives you the basis to live in your present with more peace, and hopefully it gives you wisdom for your future.
Yeah.
So I think there's this movement within community with me moving from the shoulds to this prescribing what was.
Yeah.
And the language I'm trying to hijack that language, shame-based shoulds, to in a more acceptance shoulds. Okay. Yeah. Next, I'd like you to then move it from just I should have to the internal wisdom of what you were seeking. There was something inside of all that stuff, even some of the stupidest stuff or the most painful or most costly stuff. It was your attempt to work things out. Mm-hmm. And within your struggle, there was something you were trying to do. Mm-hmm. Okay. let's take someone who's drinking, or, doing drugs, they're doing coke, right? And they're doing coke because when you're on coke, you feel really good. I'm telling you, there's so much dopamine that you get. It's incredible, right? So you'd say, okay, wow, but wow, what the cost, because I did all sorts of stupid stuff when I was doing, coke. Well, okay. But we'd say, okay, but I should have done coke because I did coke, right? And okay, I begin to have compassion for that, right? And then I'd say, within those decisions that I feel regret over, actually, those were my attempt. Agreeably, we can know that they were probably sort of unhealthy attempts, but it was my attempt to try to fix something. Mm-hmm. Okay? It was actually my attempt to try to resolve something. Let's say taking coke, or using coke. It's like, in my own way, I was trying to find joy in my life. Mm-hmm. My own way, I was trying to fix this biology of mine. Instead of taking Prozac, I was taking cocaine. But even within your story, even within all the struggle and in all the cost, was your journey of trying to work things out, trying to resolve things, trying to fix things in your own way. Now, I get it, right? If we were busting things up while we were trying to fix them, it was like, oh my God, that didn't work. Oh yeah, because all you had was a hammer, But in a way, it began to start to see it through this lens of what you were trying to work out, trying to fix in a way. And to get to see within that was, if all I have is one or two tools and I don't have much flexibility and I can do some painful stuff, right? Okay. But I think there's beginning to see that unconscious wisdom or acting needs out that you're trying to resolve in some way, trying to fix. And I think that gives you a much more compassionate sort of, actually almost self-respecting side, right? I can look back in my first marriage and some of those choices and like, oh my gosh, the immaturity and the avoidance. But in my own way, I was trying to work it out and I didn't know what was up, and what to do with it all. But in my own way, I was trying to resolve things in my life. And I picked somebody who was going to push all my buttons to force me, maybe, to try to work on myself.
Yeah.
So in my own way, I unconsciously chose and created a situation that was painful and costly, but actually was what I needed, right? So they say in life, you don't get what you want, but you will get what you need. Or the other way to say it is, if you do get what you want, you won't get what you need. So I think the movement, as all of us and everybody, you and me and everybody watching this, I'm trying to move to start to see this through this lens of both compassion, but also see the unconscious wisdom of what I was somehow trying to fix things in there. Then the next stage to me is I begin, and this is, oh my gosh, you just got to bake this till you make it, but begin to give thanks for your past. Begin to find, I think the opposite of regret is gratitude. And begin to look back for your past, all of it, and begin to have gratitude and radical acceptance of your whole past, right? Okay. And this is really hard. And I tell you, most times, Danny, it's just like, I think for most of us, it can feel like faking it. And it's like, it always feels like faking it. It's going to be really
totally.
But we're fighting for this, Danny. I'm fighting for I can't relive the life, and I can either beat myself up for it, or I can find within that journey this hidden hand, of God helping, right? It was the broken path that brought me to you, kind of thing, right? And you'll hear people in AA say this. So AA people have gnarly stories. Anybody listen to us today, if you want to just go visit a 12-step program, any 12-step program, and just sit, just listen. You will hear gnarly stories. People have been in and out of jail. They are on their third DUI. They had to ride their bike to the meeting because their license was taken away. Their kids hate them. It's incredible amount of stuff, right? Okay. But you'll hear people in AA say this: if I have to give up what I have now, their recovery and what it gives them as far as their community and their depth, to not go through what I went through, if I could relive it, not go through it, but I'm not going to get this recovery. I'm not going to get this depth. They'd say, I wouldn't do it. I will go through that again to get what I have now, right? Wow. Because what they're saying is, I now look back on my past as the necessary path for me to get where I am.
Yeah.
Right? Wow. That's a heavy lift, but it's boy, then we're really, and this is a daily practice. I don't think it's because your regret and your shame is so biological. And that's going to be the weight, the gravity is going to pull. It's like the black hole sucking in all the light, right? But now I'm trying to practice this other place of accepting and having gratitude for my journey, right? So this very famous quote that you and I, I've said before, and it's by this old saint, and it's basically, it says, first comes the fall, then the recovery from the fall, and both are the grace of God. It wasn't just a recovery when God saved you from your sin. That's grace of God. It's actually your sin. When you're in your sin, that was the grace of God.
Amen.
Wow. Something within that was part of your learning, growing. And I'm going to believe most of you listening to us today, you're in the same journey that Danny and I are, is they're trying to come to terms, but also learn from all that. So all that becomes the stuff that actually gives us depth. And in God's economy, it gives us ministry. It gives us, we actually can now have deeper empathy. We have humility. We have compassion and connection to other people. We have a depth about us that allows us to create space for people. That's who I want around me. I want broken people. I don't want people, I don't want Pharisees around me. I do not want that. I want people who know they're screwed up. So the regret now turns into gratitude is what we do. But Danny, it's a day-to-day struggle. It's a wrestling match because it's biological too in our head. Okay.
It is.
But we, especially as we age, we really want to come to a place of real sense of, I'm at peace with my whole story.
Yeah.
My whole story. I'm at peace with it all. It was my way of trying to figure out even all the crappy stuff. And oh my God, the stories can be, actually half the stories are pretty funny when you look back on them, but they're also pretty painful. But it was even my attempt at working things out.
Yeah.
And yeah, back then I didn't have the tools. I didn't even know what was going on. I didn't have the language.
Yeah.
But in my own way. So I began to have less judgment about that past.
Yeah.
And now I embrace compassion for what was the why fors, and even gratitude for the purpose of it. That's the grace. That my whole story is part of that grace.
Amen.
Okay? So I think that's what we hope to get to. Everybody listening today, you have to practice that. So when you said, here's the stuff I regret, and now we're going to say, I should have, and then you're going to write a list, I'm thankful that. Put the regret in there. Can I say I'm thankful that I married my first wife? If I can't get there, then I'm still living in probably judgment towards it. Can I be thankful? Now, that can be hard. There's the shame-based stuff, and which is not necessarily my choice, but things done to me, of being abused and stuff, right? People can even get there with that, but you gotta be careful because that can sometimes be victimizing the victim, because you need room for your own anger and your grief and your boundaries and all those things too. So I want to have that. But I think even people that have gone through abuse, probably not a lot of us get there, but if we can, we fight for actually being thankful for that story too.
Yeah.
We embrace it all. We become the wounded healer, Annie, basically.
Amen. Well, exactly. And instead of living out of the wounds, we're living like Jesus now out of the scars, right? Yeah. I heard this yesterday. One of our students in the Feel Better Journey explained how when Jesus resurrected, he still had his scars, and those were his strength. Those were the proof of what he went through. And that's, what Thomas finally got to believe or whatever. But Jim, as you were talking, it's like, man, allowing sometimes to find the gratitude, you're clawing up a hill and the only gratitude you can find is, okay, God, what are you going to do with this? Like, how are you going to make this pain become my purpose? Or I say it all the time, our messes become our message. And we're not necessarily all sharing the depths of what we went through. I don't share publicly the depths of the abuse or whatever. I share it in my program. You guys know this, but the wisdom that we gain or the connection with other humans that we gain, sometimes that's what we're grateful for. I mean, that is, and you don't have to share your deepest, darkest secrets with the whole world, but I hope that you're sharing it with one human being who's safe or two human beings who are safe and doing the work on themselves so that you're not held so captive by the regret, by the judgment, by the shame, and you can actually experience God's grace. You can actually, whoa, this is Jesus Emmanuel with us, healing us one day at a time. And
in a way, and it's, again, every person has to fight for it in their own way. And it's I want to be so careful not to shame people that they have very painful stories. I mean, there's some gnarly stuff. But ultimately, if I fight for it, I think one of the signs will be that I'm certainly not in judgment, but I'm actually in gratitude. I'm able to take it and turn it around and make it now my story. And I've seen people do this with crazy stuff, like lose a child, kid gets, killed by a drunk driver, right? And now they're helping other people.
Yeah.
A good friend of mine whose son committed suicide, 20 years ago. And now she speaks to the high school groups and helps people who deal with suicidalness. It's like, man, how do you embrace all that? Because you you make it bigger than you.
Yeah.
And you find a way then you go through this sort of sense of de-shaming it, but also now creating gratitude for it and using it, making it purpose in it.
Yeah.
It's just finding meaning within your struggling, right? And think of your past as having meaning. It happened for reasons. And now finding that meaning gives you now wisdom for your present and your future.
Yeah.
So this, I think, is the woulda, coulda, shouldas. We all have it. We all wrestle with it. But we're going to wrestle so that we come, the other side of it is gratitude, being at peace with my story. I don't need it to be anything different than it is, And I think it then actually gives us wisdom for our future as we try to make, better choices for ourselves.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I want to say one last thing, and we could talk about this for another hour, but forgiveness. I think that sometimes in Christian culture, we're forced to forgive those who have abused us or have harmed us, like almost strong, twist my arm, I got to forgive them. Okay, I forgive them, right? But in our heart of hearts, we're still deeply wounded. So I want to be very careful. If you have been abused or you've been through like a shitstorm of pain, don't go straight to forgiveness. Like forgiveness, first of all, ultimately, theologically, it's Jesus's job. Yes, I think it does help us and it's biblical for us to forgive. But you guys, some of us, we get hung up and we can't forgive because we're forced to forgive. Like put forgiveness aside for a moment and just work through empathy and compassion for yourself, right? And work through all of that. And forgiveness comes, and forgiveness is a complicated beast for some of us who have been very harmed. And so if you've been harmed, I just put forgiveness aside for a second, because I think sometimes that's the biggest inhibitor. Like, well, how can I? And sometimes it's like, how can you? It's a heavy lift. And
you don't need to.
Yeah.
And it's okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Give yourself grace even in that.
Yeah. But within community and within sharing, to begin to slowly embrace your story.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's sore because these are triggers. And you remember, we can just get triggered by a thought I can think back about things in my past that will just trigger me. Nothing's happening outside, but just my head is I'll trigger myself.
Totally.
Right? So I'm trying now to be able to come to those places, those thoughts, those parts of me, not shame myself for the thoughts, but to begin to, truly enact gratitude for that.
Yeah.
See the good that came out of it. See the unconscious wisdom, even in some of the difficult, sometimes painful choices there was deeper things going on. And then look back with gratitude for the story.
Well, and you guys, hope and gratitude, like just have hope that if you're on the journey, the gratitude will come eventually. Like don't rush to get there. First step, what Jim said in the beginning, just get out of your own head by yourself. Share it in a safe space with a safe human, find a good therapist, find a good person at church who's safe and work through their stuff. A recovery group, support group. I mean, all of the things. Like there's safe people out there who are doing their work, right? Sometimes just that's the first step. So don't rush to like, oh gosh, I got to be grateful for all this. Like, okay, hold on. You'll get there. Jim's just trying to paint a picture of like what can come if
that journey, exactly.
Journey and stay on the path and get out of the shoulda, coulda, woulda, because it's just beating yourself up. You've been through enough pain. We just talked about it inside the program about the pain tax. Some of us are paying the pain tax. Like we not only paid for it once when the event happened, but now we keep paying the pain tax because we're
over and over and over again. Right?
Oh my gosh. I think that's going to be the title of my book, The Pain Tax.
I like it.
Hello, my friend. If this episode blessed you, made you laugh, or triggered you, hey, that's growth. Please do me a favor and share this with a friend. And if you feel led, please leave a written review for the show. That really helps us out. Don't forget you are in good company if you're feeling more broken than you'd like to admit. And you are more loved than you can ever imagine. Have a great week. See you next time.